Mr. President and members, this is spending money that we do not have. We are here at the very beginning of what's going to be a rough legislative session. And we're going to spend most of our time, we should be spending most of our time on the budget, on the state budget deficit of over $1 billion. This will make our budget deficit in the out years worse. This bill is going backwards, Mr. President. Countries and governments that borrow and spend too much are collapsing. You can look across the Atlantic at the global financial crisis that is occurring in countries like Greece and Italy and Portugal and Spain. Just this week, if you looked at the newspapers, they're talking about a debt crisis, a borrowing crisis. Closer to home, we have state government budgets that are collapsing. California, Illinois, New York. Mr. President, we should do first things first. We should take care of our budget deficit first. That is why I'm offering this motion to send this bill back for further work in committee. Mr. President, our taxpayers, our families are at a breaking point. This economy has forced everyone to go through an exercise of cuts and streamlining and freezes and re-engineering. We've got a whole new vocabulary that has grown up around this. But it seems like the last institution to get that the world has changed is the legislature. We have passed billion-dollar bonding bills almost every other year. But I submit that the world and our economy and our budgets have fundamentally changed, so much so that we can't be about business as usual anymore. We can't borrow and spend like this. Our state credit card is maxed out. So when one of your family members comes home and says, well, my credit card's maxed out, but there's a good sale down the road, that's not time to that's not time to get another credit card. Mr. President, we can't afford this. Our state credit ratings are threatened. We're going to be talking about short-term borrowing soon, deferrals, IOUs, shifts. We have record deficits. We have record deficits here. We have record deficits at the federal government level. The federal government just lifted their debt ceiling to $14 trillion. I think these numbers have become so big, it's hard to fathom them. I'm not even sure somebody could write that on the board. $14 trillion. And Mr. President, I know at some point today we're going to hear about jobs, but we just had one of the largest experiments in the history of the world as to whether government can create jobs. And it was called the federal stimulus bill. $787 billion. That was to keep our unemployment rate at 8%. Well, it shot through 8, went through 9, and got up to 10%. Our voters, our taxpayers don't believe that government can get us out of recession by borrowing and spending. Mr. President, again, I think there have been some fundamental changes in our world and in our economy literally since we were last here, last spring. We need to send this bill back to committee where we could talk about, does it really create jobs? We need to send this bill back to committee where we can talk about, is this the right time? Is this the right time to break what we've been following for decades, that 3% debt guideline? Is now the right time to do that? Or is now the right time to live within our means? To tighten our belts a little bit, Mr. President, just like Minnesota families and Minnesota businesses and Minnesota taxpayers are doing.